jobs and in tourism-related jobs in services such as transportation, hotels and restaurants, casinos, entertainment, and retail, as well as non-regular workers in manufacturing. For the transport group, we do not discount the bus drivers, the jeepney drivers as well, even if they're not related to tourism. They're bringing employees back and forth to the cities, to their places of work. The pandemic worsened the job insecurity and precariousness in the service industry brought about by the so-called fourth industrial revolution. We have been discussing this for some time, this fourth industrial revolution for about 5 years now, since 5 years ago. Before the pandemic, digitization and the advent of AI have endangered not only back office jobs, but also frontline jobs. Witness the introduction of self-service kiosks in banks, where bank customers can complete transactions such as paying bills, opening an account, or even sending money without interacting with a bank teller. The bank employees' nightmare of tellerless and counterless banks can become, I repeat, the bank employees' nightmare. This is a nightmare for us because it might affect our number of employees. Tellerless and counterless banks can become a reality sooner than later. Banks will have to do this if only to become competitive. And how we address this one as unions is another matter. Mobile internet banking has the potential of making
Sir, nakamute ka.
Nakamute si Pangulo.
from the very beginning.
Ngayon lang. Go ahead.
Ngayon lang. Narinig nyo yung...
Yes, narinig namin. Yung ano lang, kakamute mo lang.
Bakit lang? Okay. Wala naman akong pinipindot. Anyways, yan ng technology. Again, I start with this. I hope you heard the one I said a while ago. Modern mobile internet banking has the potential of making brick and mortar bank branches obsolete. And the pandemic has accelerated this trend towards low-touch, high-tech processes or processes that need very little human intervention. Moreover, more and more are being employed in digital platforms where another employer-employee relationship does not exist and where employers have no obligations to their workers. Unions, therefore, need to identify and analyze trends in order to craft effective and realistic strategies and tactics that will address two equally important objectives. Help companies recover from the pandemic-induced economic displacement, while at the same time preserving the hard-earned union gains. Brothers and sisters, I believe that with the help of our two resource persons, Professor Melisa Serrano of the UP School of Labor and Industrial Relations, and Miss Michelle Belino of the UNI-APRO. Elaborating, explaining, expounding on the issues and challenges brought about by this situation. All participants at the end of the day will understand better what we are facing today and the days ahead. The task is so enormous and gigantic. I said enormous and gigantic, because that is what it is. That it is imperative that we are up to it and to have the right perspective in dealing with the same. I understand there are so many CBA negotiations undergoing now to virtual scheme only, and this is likewise a big challenge for us. Toward this end, allow me to express our appreciation to UNI-APRO Regional Secretary Rajendra Kumar Acharya for taking time out from his extremely busy schedule to join us and give an inspirational message for our webinar. Likewise, lest I forget to mention the generosity of Brother Raj and its UNI-APRO office for sharing a substantial amount to the community pantries at Barangay Balara, Quezon City, as part of our Labor Day celebration, and contribution by UNI-PLC as being the co-sponsor, and of course with the youth and its youth officer, Brother Tony Polgado, as the main point. Man, rest assured, Brother Raj, said assistance is well appreciated and will not be forgotten. Brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen, again, good day, and let's have a fruitful webinar. Mabuhay tayong lahat. Happy Labor Day, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Brother Exie, for your welcome remarks. At this point, we would ask, we thank our special guest here, Brother Regional Secretary Rajendra Acharya, who took time to be with us despite being busy with the 20 other countries in the Asia Pacific region. So without further ado, I would like to call on UNI-APRO Regional Secretary, Brother Rajendra Acharya, to give his message to the webinar.
Thank you, Bobby. Thank you, Bobby. Thank you, Brother Exie, for your very inspiring. Basically, you are the inspirational speaker, I guess, not me. You have inspired us. Thank you very much for your very inspirational welcome note. Let me first thank you for inviting me to join this very important event. On my one and on behalf of more than 3 million members, nearly around 200 unions in Asia Pacific region, I wish you a very happy Labor Day. This day is observed to commemorate the historical achievement, historical struggle of the working people. The day has an eventful historical background. I'm not going to repeat all those because you are already aware of what happened nearly 130 years, 132 years back. So as we know how important this day is for the workers across the world and throughout any industry, any sector, or any crafts. Like last year, the usual gathering and the celebration are not possible this year too, amid coronavirus pandemic, but the day remains very special and very important for all of us. An unprecedented global pandemic and a looming global economic downturn, which is likely to be more severe. These are challenging times for all of us. All of us will need to be resilient and adapt to the changes. That is what Brother Exie has also highlighted on many fronts. So they are coming to our work, they are coming to our union movement. So we need to be ready to cope with the challenges. They are coming further. We all applaud to our heroes from all the uni sector, working as frontline workers, essential workers, working around the clock from home despite of challenges. Our sisters facing a very tough time to work from home with various difficulties, some sort of, sometimes even harassment, and also sometimes even violence as well. So our young workers is struggling to fight for life and helping people despite of the growing mental stress and the questions for mental wellness. So all, we have our salute to you. So worker in the gaming, I know Philippines is one of the gaming hub. Workers in the gaming sector are losing job and income due to the closure of casinos, massive layoff, and a big concern of most gaming countries in the region, including Philippines. Some companies are taking advantage of the pandemic too and lay off workers, and they are preventing unionization in the workplaces. So we have to even strengthen our effort. That is what we have heard from the report from casino sector or the gaming sector in Philippines and other countries as well. The postal and logistics sector has also been essential service during the pandemic. The key challenge for affiliates is maintaining their commitment to provide universal services while protecting workers from the risk of the infection. We have seen the report from the delivery workers, the postal workers. They have been working throughout over the night without having any rest and risking their life. But at the same time, there are threat of job cut. I receive a report from Philippines. The PUP has to knock the door for the postal administration not to retrench any. So these are the activities that our unions, our affiliates are doing. Stories of contract center workers, the call center workers in the Philippines and any other countries in the region, how badly they are treated or they were treated during the time. It is very difficult. It is very condemnable that they had to sleep on the floor at their workstations. So the greatest impact of the finance sector is also challenging. What Exie has already said, the fintech is coming, the digitalization of work from home or remote work is another area that finance and ICTS will be hugely impacted, arising with the transition. So many banks stepped up to using digital technologies during the lockdown period, which have implication for the frontline workers. Our unions were advocating the PPEs, hazards pay, safe practices. At the same time, so many workers had no union protection or access to the safety committee. Many were terrified during COVID to go their job, and many were abandoned by their government when it comes to a safety at work. Some of these workers stood up to protest unsafe conditions. Far too many were even fired in retaliation. Organizing, strengthening collective bargaining, empowering women and young workers, and setting up workplace OSH committees with proper union representation are key work immediately we have to start. We have to continue them. I'm happy to note that despite of the longest ever lockdown, you call it community quarantine, UNI-PLC and all UNI affiliates in the Philippines are working to achieve these goals. You are working in bigger alliance to protect workers' rights, human rights. You are working to support the marginalized section of the communities. You are bringing unions and affiliates in more stronger network. I appreciate the work Brother Exie and the team has done together with all the leaders of our affiliates. Sadly, we have lost many comrades during this period due to COVID-19. We will never forget them and their fight and struggle for the workers. This May Day, UNI-APRO pledges to work with our affiliates, empower unions to bargain for their job and income security, and for better protection of the workplaces. We will work with Global Union. We are working with them and fellow Global Union Federation to change the global rule to recognize health and safety at work is a fundamental right. We are raising our concern and voices of access to the vaccination and stop vaccine nationalism. And we will work to get government to classify COVID-19 as an occupational disease. I have heard in Philippines there has been progress in this front as well, which is really very good achievement. As highlighted by Exie, even before the pandemic, we have been facing challenges of changing world and the changing world of work. Digitalization, automation, artificial intelligence, even robotization, these were the one we were very deeply discussing since couple of years, and these issues will not be forgotten because these are around there in the corner. So we have to deal with them. The issue of climate change is another area that union should be looking into, because the country like Philippines and many countries in Asia Pacific, we have a huge threat of climate change. So we will be working with other partners in this front as well, and I would like UNI-PLC and the Philippines affiliates also to put that effort into this angle. So let's build forward together. That is what our sectoral slogan for our sector conference this year: building forward together and create with our hands an inclusive, equitable and sustainable future. So I wish you all the best for you, and I wish you all safe, meaningful and happy May Day. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brother Raj. Thank you, thank you. We now have 67 participants to our webinar. Before Brother Raj might leave us in a few minutes, so let's take a group photo. I ask everybody to open their videos. Open your videos. We'll have to take 3 shots. Can I request everybody to let's take 2 or 3 sets of pictures. Let's first take a group photo with our clenched fist. Don't worry, Exie will not red tag you. We will not publish this in a newspaper of general circulation.
But we are being monitored, so we have now to bring our fist up.
Okay.
And the other
please
one,
open your videos. Please open your videos.
and Bobby, the other one is the Myanmar support.
This also.
Okay.
That's number 2, and number 3, just the face, right?
We need to
thumbs up.
we need 3 shots each. So okay, first one, 1, 2, ready. Okay, next one, please. 1, 2, ready. 1, 3, 12. Next screen, please. 1, 2, ready. Maraming hindi naka video.
Open your videos, please.
Let's take our group photo with the Myanmar solidarity sign. Okay. First screen, 1, 2, ready. Second screen.
Hindi ka na makita ang kamay mo.
1, 2, ready. And finally, third screen. 1, 2, ready. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Brother Raj, for your message.
Thank you very much. I have to quickly join the another one with the Singapore NTUC. Okay. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Brother Raj.
Welcome
Thank
to
you.
stay, but we understand that you have very many appointments today, especially because of technology.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Brother Raj.
Thank you, Brother Raj.
Okay. At this point, we call on our main one of our 2 main resource persons. The country has very few pro-labor intellectuals. She is one of them. And she has written several papers and several books on the subject of industrial relations, especially on topics such as social inclusion, during regional integration, union voice in companies and in policy making. She teaches at the University of the Philippines School for Labor and Industrial Relations. She has doctorate in from the Global Labor Institute, as well as a master's degree at UP-SOLAIR. I give you Dr. Melisa Serrano of the UP School of Labor and Industrial Relations.
We now have 65 participants today.
Dr. Mel?
Maraming salamat, Bobit. And thank you for inviting me to be one of your resource persons for this webinar or forum. And I wish to greet you isang mainit at mapagpalayang araw ng paggawa sa ating lahat. Very timely po ang topic because it's about workplace changes during the pandemic time, and changes as well that have been exacerbated or speeded up by the pandemic. And of course, araw ng paggawa, ibig sabihin may marami din po tayong mga pagbabago sa lugar paggawa na naipanalo simula po na magsimula ang kilusang paggawa sa mundo. So I prepared like some slides for my presentation, so I'm going to share them now. So nakikita niyo po ba? Sorry. Oh, okay. So workplace changes in the time of COVID-19. I will be speaking about 4 major changes that have been taking place or have taken place in the time of COVID-19, whether these changes were existing before the pandemic or these changes have not been that visible during this pandemic. So first is, I'd like to call your attention to some DOLE issued regulations during COVID-19, which have facilitated some changes that we are witnessing and experiencing right now. At marami po dito ay nabanggit na kanina ni Pangulong Exie. One is on Labor Advisory number 09/2020 nung March po. These are some guidelines on the implementation of flexible work arrangements as remedial measure. So in lieu of job loss or job displacement, the Department of Labor is encouraging establishments to adopt flexible work arrangements such as reduction of work hours and or work days per week, rotation of workers, forced leave, and other forms of flexible work arrangements, or what we call FWAs. And then in May, naglabas po ng Labor Advisory number 17, last year po, 2020, guidelines on employment preservation upon the resumption of business operation. This labor advisory complements the earlier one, but it provides other forms or more forms of flexible work arrangements, work from home and telecommunicating work arrangements, again, flexible work arrangements and temporary alternative work schemes. Kung maalala po ninyo, this labor advisory even has a contentious provision in terms of yung adjustments po, no? Sa wages natin and wage-related benefits, including those covered by CBAs, of course, voluntarily, no? May consent po ang workers, and this was contentious, and the trade union somehow pressured the government to delete this provision so that in August, Advisory 17-B superseded Labor Advisory number 17 at wala na po itong provision in terms of adjustment ng wages, with adjustment meaning ang adjustment na po ay hindi naman pataas kundi pabawas. So another DOLE issued regulation is Department Order number 215 issued in October 23, which amended, Section 12, Rule 1 ng Book 6 po ng Book 6 ng Labor Code. Here is the floating status issue. This DO allowed the extension of the floating status from 6 months to 1 year. But of course, it requires 10 days, at least 10 days notification, no, to the DOL about this extension. But employees need to agree to this extension. Now, if employees are forced to accept the 6 months and extension, they can file a case of constructive dismissal. So involuntary resignation resorted to when continued employment becomes impossible, unreasonable, or unlikely. So meaning what I'm showing here is there are regulations that facilitated or initiated, a more intense adoption of workplace changes during the pandemic, and we're not sure yet if these changes will endure after the pandemic or post-pandemic, because we still don't know when is the post in the case of the Philippines, the post-pandemic. Now here also shows you that there are other government regulations, particularly this one, DOL, DTI DOL Joint Memo Circular. These are all the health protocols at the workplace on the prevention and control of COVID-19. So I will discuss this one later on in my presentation. So there are, I divide this into two, the workplace changes brought about or accelerated by the pandemic. One is the on-site changes, meaning workers are still reporting to work in their workplace, offices, work sites, etc., and the off-site, particularly work from home arrangements. So on the on-site workplace-based changes, and these are forms of flexible work arrangements, we have identified 5. One is, we all know, job rotation or job sharing. So we hear workers are alternately reporting to work within the work week or within the month, just to preserve jobs. We also have this workplace arrangement called compressed work time. So you have this group of workers working straight for a given number of days, say 14 days. Then they take a break for a week or two. Then another batch of workers during their so-called non-working days will take the days that this group of workers did not report to work. There is also what we call a work bubble. So workers are parang yung NCR plus po natin, no? Bubble, uso na yan ngayon. So here workers report to work either on their regular working time or compressed work week mode, but they are provided with on-site or near-site accommodation. So para hindi po ma-prevent yung infection ng COVID-19. There is also the forced leave mode or arrangement. And this can be either employer-initiated, no, or employee-initiated. Sometimes the workers themselves request for forced leave. This is in particular sa mga hospitals po, because they're afraid to get infected. And of course, you can get paid for forced leave if you still have available vacation leave and sick leave credits, or you have emergency leave that you can use for the forced leave. And the broken time schedule, which is a shorter work day, particularly in observance po pag may curfew during ECQ and MECQ. There are also temporary alternative work schemes that in a way try to prevent job losses. And these include transfer of employees to another branch or outlet instead of retrenching these workers, or assigning employees to another function or position. Meron din po yung reduction of normal work days per day or week, whether this may be like with guaranteed full pay or may bawas po sa sweldo, and of course benefits as well. There is also this workplace adjustment called partial closure of some units or departments. Of course, this results in work suspension for workers affected. And then we have, keep putting workers and employees on floating status, which can range from 6 months to 1 year. Now, yung sinabi ko po kanilang DOL DTI guidelines also in many ways are facilitating workplace changes, in order to observe COVID-19 health protocols. I mean, they influence in a way that the workplace is rearranged, schedules of work are also adjusted, and etc. So these include observance of physical distancing, at least a meter, limitations on gatherings, like large gatherings, small gatherings. Depende po yan sa CQ natin, no? Sa community quarantine. So it can be 30%, 10%, 50%. Then staggered breaks. So hindi po sabay-sabay ang manggagawa na merong lunch break. So iba-iba po yung breaks nila. And then having fewer or reduced work shifts and fewer workers per shift. And then, of course, a limitation and prohibition on open workspaces, particularly in the IT industry po, no? We have these open workspaces where workers before and employees before just go there and then they share the workspaces, share tools, equipment desk. Medyo ito po ay limited na ngayon and even prohibited. And of course, shorter work hours due to curfew. Now, what have been the impacts of this workplace changes? Now, on-site workplace changes. The downside, of course, Exie mentioned many of these earlier, is, of course, from reduction in pay and benefits to no pay at all, particularly for work suspension and days without work. Another downside is that employment losses, and kung hindi man kayo nawala ng trabaho, ay nabawasan yung working hours for those who remain employed. Of course, another downside is when you still report to work, the risk of infection is higher at the workplace. And we all know that, of course, the difficulties in organizing workers have been heightened during the pandemic. There are also elements on the bright side, itong kanan po ninyo, no? So for some workers, in some cases, even if a work has been shortened, no, they still enjoy guaranteed full pay and benefits. Job preservation, though this is not true for all. Reduced exposure to risk of infection because fewer work days. And of course, still you have interaction with colleagues, although controlled. I mean, interaction is important in terms of mental health issues. And many of the flexible work arrangements and alternative work schemes require employers to secure consent of workers before they can implement these workplace adjustments. Another workplace change is offsite, or what we call mostly work from home. And there are emerging two models: pure work from home model and the hybrid model. So yung pure po is most of the time you work from home, in a cafe, in a beach, wherever, but mostly at home. And it is done outside the workplace, but there are intermittent reporting to the office as the need arises. And there is what we call the hybrid model as well. So it's a combination of work from home and regular on-location work. And because some forms of work need a customer interface and some interaction with colleagues, sabi ko nga kanina, for our mental well-being and learning as well. So what have been the perceived advantages of work from home? I mean, many of us already know this. Now we can choose to work from any place, but we cannot do this under MECQ or ECQ. They say that this helps improve productivity. There was a 2020 Air Tasker survey showing that remote employees, meaning those who are working outside the workplace, work 1.4 days more per month than their office-based colleagues. Of course, because we do not commute, we don't use transportation, this reduces carbon footprint. And of course, reduces the cost of real estate. Nababawasan yung office space ng mga employers. It helps also in getting talents which were unavailable earlier due to various constraints. And this addresses migration issues. So your workforce now is a global workforce. And this is particularly true on the last bullet in terms of increasing the number of freelancers. So it also helps create more work, although of course, freelance work leaves much to be desired as well. The challenges are more and myriad. So work disrupting private lives, so intense employer surveillance, compromises our privacy, so the blurring of private life and working life. It also digitally divides the workforce between those with technological resources and skills against those who lack these resources. It also entails logistic costs, like how do we set a home office, equipment, internet service, power, electricity. Yung libreng kape, wala na. To tayo and other perks, no, that we enjoy if we were working in an office setup. And of course, we don't also have the ergonomic chairs, equipment, workspace, etc. in the home. Pero na lang kung babayaran ito ng employer natin. And there's also an implication in terms of reduction of compensation package. How do we compute overtime pay? Wala na ba yung travel allowance natin, yung meal allowance, and other allowances we enjoyed when we were working on site or in the office? Challenges again, lack of physical interactions with colleagues and bosses. Because hindi lamang naman po formal training, but we also learn collective learning when we interact with our colleagues and bosses. And for new employees and interns, what about on-the-job training? This shuts off this avenue for these workers. And there are also health issues, back pain, difficulty sleeping, stiff neck, the right to disconnect. So alas 9 na, alas 10 na, tinetext pa rin tayo ng ating mga boss. So, our work hours have become, longer, and this is one of the negative implications of work from home arrangements. And particularly for women, work from home further reinforces gender roles. No? Women may be more burdened balancing both office work and domestic chores. There's also impact on training in terms of, we have to train the workforce more with the use of technology. The need for training will rise further. And in the pandemic, the training process is slowed down. So kasi nga, naka-lockdown tayo, hindi tayo makalabas. And we all know the impact of unionization of work from home. Workers are isolated, workers are atomized, so it's very difficult to reach out and organize them, communicate with them, despite the presence of, information technology, social media. And iba pa rin po ang physical presence during collective bargaining, in terms of exerting worker pressure. So we have a Telecommunicating Act of 2018, which of course recognizes telecommunicating or work from home arrangements, but this is on mutual consent between the employer and the employee. It ensures fair treatment. Ito po yung same or equivalent workload, performance standards, rates of pay, collective rights, some rules on data privacy. Of course, work from home employees are covered by the labor code, but many of these rules have been somehow not observed during the pandemic because biglaan po ito. So for example, medyo problematic po yung workers have to be provided with terms and conditions of that arrangement. So, and then of course some issues on overtime pay, etc. So marami pong hindi nasunod sa Telecommunicating Act, so work from home arrangements that we are doing right now. So what is the post-pandemic outlook for work from home arrangements? There is a survey done by the Management Association of the Philippines and PwC Price White House and Cooper involving 161 CEOs conducted in July to August 2020. The sample is from small to large enterprises. Half are large enterprises. The sectors covered were professional and business services, financial services, technology, manufacturing, and transport and logistics. Many of these sectors are uni sectors. So ang findings po is 73% of the CEOs said that they will still implement a work from home policy even after COVID-19 pandemic eases. 87% believe their organizational culture empowers employees to work effectively at home if the need arises, and 40% said they see a potential reduction in their office space in the next 12 months because many of their workers are now migrating to work from home arrangements. The third change would be the expansion of platform-based work. We all know this. And platform-based work is basically divided into two major categories. The physical location-based, so we are familiar with the pictures here, no? Food couriers, transport, Airbnb, and the pure web-based, the crowd work, freelance work. So you can't see, your clients, you can't see the platform, etc. Dito rin naman po yan. So with COVID-19, this has expanded. So makikita natin, mas marami po ang mga food couriers na sa daan ngayon kaysa sa sasakyan in many streets and roads in Metro Manila, for example. And I consider platform work as a form of non-standard employment. So with the expansion of non-standard, with platform work, we also see an expansion of non-standard employment. And we all know the challenges that workers face, that workers on non-standard employment face. So ito po yung sa ILO categories ng non-standard employment. So it's characterized by temporary employment, part-time or on-call work. There is also multi-party employment relationship in the case of platform work. Ito po. And disguised self-employment, the worker misclassification. Now, we heard, for example, last year, the Food Panda riders strike in the Philippines. These are the issues of platform workers: long work hours, diminishing incomes and incentives, job instability. Alam po natin yan because of the lack of employment relationship, lack of access to social security, health and accident insurance. And because of that, they are more exposed to occupational risks and hazards. They have a boss. It's invisible boss because of the algorithm, which is, of course, a form of intensified labor control. And control is one of the key elements of establishing an employment relationship. Kaya nga maraming kasong napanalo because of the labor control element of the employment relationship. Platform companies can unilaterally change pay and other policies. Kaya nga ito yung naging issue ng mga Food Panda workers last year. Lack of protection from arbitrary dismissal, meaning dinisconnect siya o ibilinak ka sa app. And of course, they lack voice and collective representation. The fourth change would be, this have been taking place, but this has been accelerated by the pandemic, is the digitalization of work and work processes. And here we have the frontier technologies, a group of technologies that when combined enable, the impact is multiplied and heightened. Artificial intelligence, Internet of Things, big data, blockchain, 3D printing, robotics, drones. Ito po lahat yon. So I will not discuss in detail these things. What I would like to discuss are the challenges associated with digitalization. These challenges will further amplify because the pandemic has amplified the migration to digitalization. So the debate between worker displacement and against worker complement, do they displace workers? They indeed, particularly in technology intensive countries and industries. And they, instead of complementing the worker, meaning helping the workers improve their work. And there's a widening income gap between workers in high income, highly skilled cognitive jobs. They're the winners in the digitalization process, Industry 4.0, and those in low income manual jobs. I mean, low income manual jobs would be the ones mostly affected by digitalization. This would require continuous reskilling of workers and lifelong learning, if you may. There are training challenges for certain groups of workers, particularly our older workers. So more difficult for them to adapt to digital technologies. The issue of surveillance, algorithmic control, and data privacy and protection of workers. That is also an issue on digitalization. Of course, the health risks associated with constant and digital work. Nakaupo po tayo madalas. For example, the call center workers, so musculoskeletal disorders, cardiovascular diseases, eye and ear disorders, obesity, etc. And on top of this, we don't have regulations on platform work, and even limited regulations on platform businesses. So this will be my last slide, just to give you an example on how COVID-19 pandemic is speeding up these transformations. On the left-hand side of your screen, you can see the BPO sector, particularly the call center workers. And this is also a sector in UNI, kaya ito po ang pinili ko. So the technologies that are affecting BPO workers, particularly call center workers, are cloud computing, software automation, these are disruptive technologies. And they bring greatest risk to workers in the Philippines working in call centers. No, nandito na po yung mga no. So software automation po yan. And in a study by Chang and his colleagues in 2016, they're saying that with these developments, innovations or technological innovations continuing and exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic, 89% of salaried workers in the Philippines are at high risk, BPO sector of automation. And I think we are witnessing this right now. If we look at the retail naman on the right side of your screen, they're also affected. Of course, excluding the supermarkets, retail, pwedeng department stores. The food ay medyo excluded po sila. In the study of Chang and his colleagues, they're saying that retail is at the lowest risk of automation, and this will not yet, not come because their study was done, in 2014 or 2015. But then we had the pandemic suddenly, and suddenly there is, an explosion of e-commerce, expansion of e-commerce, online shopping via the platforms. So now we see really retail is at the high risk, of this automation, and many workers, we all know, are now experiencing either employment loss or reduced working hours. So in the Philippines, for example, here you can see a significant share of retail salaried workers in ASEAN at high risk of automation. In the Philippines, 89% of workers in the retail industry will be affected, if not already being affected during the pandemic. So maraming salamat po at mabuhay ang uring manggagawa.
Maraming salamat, Professor Mel. Kailangang may gagawin pa yatang busy itong ating resource person. So, unahin na natin yung open forum at pagkatapos ng open forum ang nagpaalam siya na kung pwede siyang gumawa na ng ibang bagay. Paper pa yan na baka may tanong
Arctic.
Baka po may mga tanong. The floor is open for questions.
Bobby,
Oo.
meron lang akong tatanong kay Ma'am Mel.
Sige, kasama Tony.
Maraming salamat. Maraming salamat. Ma'am Mel.
Yes.
Naririnig niyo po ako. Maraming salamat.
Naririnig kita at nakikita rin.
Opo. Bilang isang empleyado dati sa telecommunication company, and right now nasa quasi banking operation yung company namin, money remittance. Kanina yung presentation is na-enlighten yung mga members and officers na nandito sa amin ngayon. Pero yung sinisikap ko talagang malaman, dahil nga ang hirap ngayon arukin yung antas kung kailan ito matatapos, yung kasiguruhan na kailan matatapos yung pandemya na ito, particularly in the context ng ating bansa, yung paano yung pamamahala ng ating gobyerno. Meron na po bang pag-aaral na kahit papano that give us hope, ika nga yung future of work? Parang tinitingnan ko rin po kung ngayon ay dilema ng kahirapan at walang kasiguruhan, how many years, kumbaga yung kasaysayan ng daigdig doon sa krisis pang-ekonomiya, yung pagharap niya at yung pag-inog, ito na tayo ngayon dahil Fourth Industrial Revolution. Ano yung nakasalalay sa panahon na ito na kahit papano bilang isang manggagawa na alam niyo po, pigang-piga na kami dahil too young to die, too old to find a new job. Baka naman meron din ika nga naghihintay sa mga katulad namin dahil tinignan niyo po ngayon yung dami po ng mga magagawa relatively pwedeng maisalang sa kawalan ng trabaho o paghanda namin doon sa kawalan ng trabaho. Meron bang naghihintay ika nga na future of work to us? Itong mga papunta na sa edad na ika nga hindi pa naman retirement age pero pwede pa naman. Yun po, ma'am.
Well, I wish I could tell you kung kailan matatapos itong pandemic, but I cannot really, we wouldn't know when, no? Maraming issues tayo dyan. Now, is there hope, no? Of course, hindi naman tayo nawawala ng hope eh. I mean, particularly for workers that would be easily displaced by automation. If you remember, the ILO in its centenary came out with a very good book in terms of the future of work. So it advocated for a human-centered approach, to adjustments in terms of the future of work. Well, I mean, the future of work really is, ano ibig mo sabihin dyan 10 years from now? No, the future of work is happening right now. This is now the future. Things are happening now. So, ang maganda sa sinabi ng ILO doon sa kanilang future of work book is that any adjustment should be human-centered. Any technological innovation introduced should be human in command. So, yun po yung maganda doon, no? Human in command. Of course, for those who can still continue their employment, right? But what about those, katulad nga ng sinabi mo, Tony, na medyo mahirap ng mag-adapt to these new technologies, particularly in your sector, halimbawa, no? One of the advocacies is, of course, for social protection, no? For social protection to these workers, right? So, in the event that they needed to be retrenched, what are the social protection needs of these workers? Kaya kailangan ding i-address yun. It's part of the human-centered approach. It also needs protective labor institutions for all workers that will be affected by the adjustment, meaning social protection, meaning old age pension, no? Meaning unemployment benefits, for example. I mean, the SSS provides a 2 months unemployment benefit, kalahati, etc. But that has to be expanded. That has to be expanded. Other adjustments, no? Other adjustments as well, no? And then continuous skilling and reskilling. Kasi nga, hinintay mo pang tumanda na ng ganito sa kakapa magte-train. That should be ongoing. Kasi lahat tayo, okay, bata tayo ngayon, pero tatanda din tayo. So we would be that problem. So what should we do? Reskilling, constant reskilling, lifelong learning. In France, for example, they have what they call individual training accounts. So for every year of service mo, you earn like 2 or 3 days of training, paid training. And then the company trains you or sends you out to train on a new technological innovation and how to use it. So that you can use. So naiipon yan. Every year, you have 2 years. Maganda pong isama yan, no? Carolan, sa CBA natin, no? Like individual training accounts of workers, no? That's part of the reskilling and lifelong learning. Kahit 2 days lang per year, maganda po yun, no? So 5 years kayo, 10 days na agad ang paid training ninyo. And that should be a right, no? That should be a right. The right to get trained and reskilled. Because of course, this would protect, no? This is a measure of job protection or employment protection or job security, if you may. So iba-iba po yan, kawing-kawing yan, hindi lamang workplace adjustments ang kailangan or employers actions ang kailangan dyan, but the state as well in terms of these regulations, particularly social protection, no? And of course, trade unions as well. No? We all know that hindi naman benevolent ang, well, meron sigurong konting employers na benevolent that you have to fight, no? You have to struggle, no? To get these measures. So, I mean, continuous, marami naman pong naipanalo, kaya nga we celebrate Labor Day, marami ng benepisyong napanalo, all these things, the holiday, for example, today is May, it's a holiday, pinanalo. So, I mean, we have to recognize the trade unions as a labor institution play a crucial role in terms of, mitigating, if not, addressing, the adverse impacts of the rates of the future work. Masyado pong mahaba, sorry kasi malawak yung
Thank you po, Ma'am Mel.
Meron pa bang ibang tanong? Kung wala muna habang nag-iisip kayo ng tanong, ako may tanong ako. Sige.
Brother Edwin,
Okay.
CIO, meron itatanong. Brother Edwin, sige, diretso muna kay Professor.
Hello ma'am, good morning. Ma'am Melisa, naririnig
morning
ko ba?
po. Yes, nakikinig ko po kayo pero hindi po kayo nakikita.
Actually, okay. Mag-ano ako video. Hello ma'am.
Hi.
Ayun.
Actually, nag-PM ako kay Brother Roland.
Okay.
Kasi yung observation ko regarding sa sitwasyon ngayon sa pandemic, yan naapektuhan tayong manggagawa. Is dahil sa mga policy making na
Boss Edwin, nagbe-break up ka,
Yes.
hindi ka maintindihan. Baka kailangan patayin mo yung video mo.
internet ko siguro.
Patayin mo lang yung
okay.
video.
Patayin na lang yung video para pakiulit tanong.
Ma'am, okay. Ma'am Melisa, actually na-PM ko kay Brad Roland. Yung lang observation ko kasi sa sitwasyon ngayon sa sa pandemic natin. Baka kasi yung government talaga yung policy making ng government natin, kaya masyadong hindi ba nahahandle masyado yung natin, yung sitwasyon sa pandemic. So baka kung just in case o sakasakali iba yung magbibigay ng mga policy, baka naman ma-address yung sitwasyon natin sa sa economic at saka sa manggagawa. May posibilidad po ba na pag iba yung hahawak ng iba yung mag-handle ng pandemic situation natin ngayon, may posibilidad po ba na ma-address yung natin, yung sitwasyon?
Well,
Loaded question.
tungkol po ba yan sa pandemya? Well,
Yes,
we don't know po kung halimbawa papalitan, yung nag-handle ngayon, yung mga people sa IATF.
Yes, ma'am. Kasi kung titingnan natin sa ibang bansa, nahahandle naman nila, hindi naman masyadong apektado yung sitwasyon ng manggagawa kasi nga yung policy na nilalatag ng gobyerno is makaka-adjust mas madaling maka-adjust yung manggagawa kaysa naman dito. Parang yung binibigay kasi na policy ng gobyerno is parang nagpapahirap pa sa manggagawa.
Opo, pero hindi rin po tayo pakasigurado kung pinalitan at yung ipapalit ay palpak pa rin sa kasalukuyang pamamahala. So, well, if for example they would put the experts, the medical experts there instead of the czars and the generals, perhaps mayroon pong pag-asa, no? But hindi ko po talaga masasagot yan there is really a need to change our policies in terms of prevention and control of COVID-19 at the national level. Maigting po yun, malinaw po yun, no? But changing the guards, the people in the IAT, would that make a difference? Perhaps, but we don't know. But still, under the present government, I cannot say that something would change, no? Something would change. Kaya nga meron pong proposal yung yung labor sector that pwede ba may representation ng labor sector naman doon sa IATF para makita ninyo yung impact naman ng mga polisiya ninyo sa mga manggagawa.
Yes.
And we can also contribute, for example, sa mga social assistance schemes and measures na kailangang ipatupad, no? And the workplace adjustments as well na pinapalabas ng Department of Labor. So, yun lang po siguro ang masasabi ko dyan sa tanong nyong yan. So, siguro mas maganda kung meron ibang mapalitan.
Sige, thank you ma'am, thank you.
May dalawa tayong nakalinya na magtatanong. Baka pwedeng magtala sila dalawa baka para isa ang sagot na lang. Tawagan ko muna si kasamang Jobel ng National Federation of Labor, tapos si kasamang Roy Villanada ng PS Bank Employees Union. Boss Jobel, may tanong ka.
Hello, Ma'am Mel. Long time no see. Long time no hear.
Long time no see, and still no see.
Hindi. Ako yung tanong ko lang. Nabanggit mo kanina kasi 89%. Oh? 89% yung ang treat ito sa manggagawa eh. Sa sitwasyon ngayon, masyado yung installation of labor saving devices na ginagawa because of this pandemic. Pero nagbabank ang mga ilan na ba yung wala ng trabaho? It's about 4.7 million na. Pero karamihan doon, ang reason for the loss of job is retrenchment due to losses. Hindi ito due to installation of labor saving devices or redundancy. Na magkaiba yung yung benefits under the collective bargaining agreement or under the labor law. So, medyo hindi balance ito at yung kasama yung taga-Department of Labor nun, pinapayagan naman itong yung sinasabing due to losses. Meron ba tayo study kung paano ito i-balance yung bagay na ito? Kasi mukhang rampant na ngayon yan eh. No? At tuloy-tuloy yung treat na to. Losses palagi ang rason. Samantalang talagang kuwan ito. Talaga namang redundancy ito. Maski sa transport industry, sa remittance industry, sa banking industry, yun, may problema tayo na malaki tungkol dito. Yun lang siguro. Meron bang studies tayo? Doon sa gobyerno, kung ipapalit na dyan sa mga IATF, yung Octa Research ng UP, o Department of Labor, yung UP-SOLAIR, o Center for Labor Studies, mas maganda siguro palitan yung mga yan dyan eh. Yun yan siguro, Ma'am Mel.
Boss Roy, baka gusto mo isunod na yung tanong mo.
Yes, bago yung tanong ko lang kasi, in regards sa mga department orders and labor advisories ng DOLE, is it advantageous to the employers or the employees?
Salamat, Roy.
Okay.
So, sagutin ko na, Bobit. Oo. So, yung tanong ni Cadiobel, no? Tungkol sa tungkol sa if there is a study, ang pagkakakuha ko, do we have a study that in a way addresses the difficulty of balancing between job preservation and business continuity or preservation or survival? Yun po ba yung point ninyo, Cadiobel?
Okay.
So yung labor saving devices, impact niyan. As far as I know, yung actual in the case of the Philippines, wala pa po. But this is really a difficult balancing act, particularly during the pandemic, because we don't really know kung talagang businesses are losing, particularly yung mga nag-operate naman po even during the ECQ. So i-segregate po natin yun. There are businesses that continue to operate although reduced capacity. Even noong Marso pa, no, tuloy-tuloy lang sila, particularly the essential services sector, including food manufacturing, for example. Money remittances, for example, di ba, kasama yan. Call centers, open po yung mga yan. Banks, open po yung mga yan. Although, of course, na-reduce yung workload nila. So for these sectors and industries, medyo hindi sila gaanong affected by, employment losses or job losses. So, but for the others, the other sectors, particularly tourism, kasama na po ang casino dyan, hotel and food, in a way, in some extent, construction, although may BBB naman tayo, ano pa ba yung ibang sector? Construction, manufacturing na non-food, or hindi kasama sa supply chain ng food and beverage manufacturing, and these are of course industries that have been affected. And of course we are also aware of cases where the pandemic has been used by employers, to violate workers' rights and to bust the union. At ang una pong nare-retrench, halimbawa, ang natatanggal ay una sa listahan, yung union leaders, pangalawa, yung union members. Many cases na po yan. Many cases. Of course, ang venue naman po ng trade union is they file, no? They file union busting cases or cases of illegal dismissal, etc. But of course, that's a legal process and mabagal ang legal process, particularly sa panahon ng pandemic. So, what I'm trying to drive at po, in short, is that yung job preservation versus business continuity and survival, mahirap po yan na balancing, but for organizations, for establishments that are unionized, maaari pong pag-usapan yan through collective bargaining, through the LMC, kaya nga mahalaga na organisado po ang mga manggagawa into a union. So, and then of course, meron naman pong reporting mechanism na nasama doon sa mga DO and labor advisories, which I will address later on. Yung po yung question ni Karoy, no? Na pwede din po nang gamitin ng mga manggagawa para ma-address po yung mga issues in terms of job losses. And remember po, no, sinabi ko nga kanina, yung DO17, no, had the provision na pwedeng i-adjust yung wages ng workers, meaning adjustment downwards, no, during the pandemic. But the trade unions really pressure the government to take up, particularly the Department of Labor. This is unjust. This is a violation of the labor code. No diminution of benefits. So kaya nga naglabas uli si Dole ng another labor advisory superseding this one. Hindi na sinama yun. Naalala ninyo, gusto pang i-withhold yung 13-month pay. Right? But then, trade unions again rallied, no, against this, put pressure, no? So even online, trade unions are putting pressure on this work. So medyo binawi yon, di ba? Binawi yung hindi mo na pagbibigay ng 13-month pay. So meaning there are ways, no, there are many ways that these issues could be addressed. Now you have the occupational pandemic, COVID-19 as an occupational disease. I mean, this was a result of continued pressure, no, from the trade unions. So meaning marami pong pwedeng gawin, no? Marami pong pwedeng gawin, bagamat marami pa ring challenges and very difficult pa rin po. Now, dun sa question po ni Karoy na are the DO issuances more advantageous to employers or employees? Depende po. Depende yan sa sitwasyon, for example, ng kumpanya, no? talagang yung kumpanya po talaga ay adversely affected. Tourism, food and accommodation, casinos. Then pwede po nating gamitin some of the labor advisories in terms of, okay, bago mo tanggalin yung manggagawa, these are the other adjustments that you can make. Yung present ko po kanina, and I can share to Bobby the slides that I presented earlier. So may mga adjustments po, no? But then, of course, may attempts po na mas advantageous sa employers. Katulad nga po nitong provision ng LA Labor Advisory 17 na allowing employers, no, together with the consent of the employees, na pwede nilang i-adjust. Adjustment can be upward or downward, but of course, during the pandemic, it's more downward adjustment in terms of wages, di ba? But then, sinabi ko nga kanina, tinanggal na po itong provision na to because of union pressure. So may attempts din po, no? Depende po sa sitwasyon ng kumpanya whether it's advantageous or disadvantageous, no? So is the company losing in the first place? Pong mga tipo. So or the sector is adversely affected. So makikita naman po natin eh. Kaya nga mahalaga again that the workplace is unionized or organized para mabantayan po itong mga pagkilos ng mga employers. May attempts po talaga na pro-employer. Pati nga yung yung 13-month pay, no? Pati nga yung floating status, no? Eh paano kung in-extend na yan ng 1 year? Wala ka ng trabaho. Diba? So, meron pong talagang ang well, on a case-to-case basis, depending on the situation of the establishment, mas kumikiling po sa, I can say that many provisions, mas kumikiling po sa business survival or business continuity. I hope I answered po yung mga questions ninyo.
Maraming salamat. Mag-11:30 na. We will take one more question. Tapos may parang wrap up comment lang si EVP Roland. And then we go to the next resource person. Ang susunod na ang last question comes from Ronnie Magat, ang presidente ng PSBEU.
Salamat, Kabobit. Magandang umaga po sa inyong lahat at mapagpalang umaga po, Ma'am Melisa. Kumusta po kayo?
Mukhang okay naman ako, di ba?
Yes, Ma'am.
Hi, Ronnie.
Good. Yes, Ma'am. Ma'am, ang tanong ko po ay may related po doon sa tanong ni Mr. Roy Villanada na as we all know, those labor advisories na ginawa ng Department of Labor na may pagkiling nga sa mga employers, no? Now, ang mahirap kasi dito pagka i-unionize ang isang company na talagang yung kanilang karapatan sinisikil ng management, no? Now, ang nito, dahil sa pagkiling ng Department of Labor, ang tanong po kaya, ma'am, ano po kaya ang magiging remedy ng mga manggagawa upang masikil ang ganitong panunupil ng mga mapagsamantalang mga management? Pwede po kayang matulungan din tayo ng Department of Labor, magpalabas din sila ng labor advisory na at least patulong naman sa mga manggagawang nasa maralita. Maraming salamat po, Ma'am Melisa.
Salamat po, Karoni. Maganda po yung point ninyo, no? Okay. What about establishments o yung mga lugar paggawa po na walang union, no? So talagang wala pong masyadong, walang masyado, but talagang hindi masyadong tali ang kamay ng mga employers para gawin yung gusto niya, no? So pwede siyang pwede, marami din po na even in construction, in manufacturing, na nagsara, so na-retrench yung workers in manufacturing, pero nag-open naman ng iba. So yung mga ganun po, no? Nagbukas naman ng ibang factory, for example, or establishment. So, at problematic po talaga, no? I mean, mas mahirap po dun sa mga establishments na hindi po siya unionized, no? So, lalo pat ang unionization rate lang po natin sa Pilipinas ay halos sumasampa lang sa 7%. So 7% lang ang kabuang empleyado, ang union members. So union density. So problematic po talaga yan. Ang pagkakaalam ko po, marami po dito sa mga labor advisories na may kinalaman po sa mga workplace adjustments, flexible work arrangements, ay kailangan po na i-inform muna ang Department of Labor bago po gawin ito. May tinatawag silang establishment report. So before these adjustments will be implemented, the employer has to inform and fill out or send the Department of Labor an establishment report. At marami dito ay particularly the flexible work arrangements, kailangan may consent po ang mga manggagawa, no? But of course, pag halimbawa talagang sisinghap-singhap na, they will file for, closure, di ba? So, pwede pong, yun po ang isang avenue, no, na particularly if the workplace is unionized, it can call the attention of the Department of Labor and say, okay, in-check na na-report po ba ito, meron po ba itong consent from the workers, etc., etc. Depende po kung ano yung sinasabi ng labor advisory or department order, no? Pero maliwanag po sa pagkabasa ko po ay kailangan merong tinatawag na establishment report. May form po yan, may form ang Department of Labor. Ikalawa, we can, bagamat na-suspend po ang inspection, ang labor inspection, nung nakaraang taon, na ibinalik naman na po. No? I think ibinalik na later last year. So we can ask for labor inspection for certain violations, no? I mean, of the labor advisories and other rights, no, under the labor code na hindi naman na in effect pa rin po at this point in time, no? Then ikatlo po ay tama po, no, maganda rin sinabi ni Ronnie na can we ask also the Department of Labor to issue a labor advisory in terms of, how do you address measures or actions of employers that violate, no, the labor advisories, kasi yun ngang inspection nila walang penalty just advice na you have to observe this one or that one. So pwede rin po natin gawin yun na namin. You sit in the National Tripartite Industrial Peace Council, there are sectoral tripartite organizations, and better that you extend, no, this labor advisory not only to the organized sector but also to the unorganized establishment. So siguro yun lang po muna ang aking masasabi sa ngayon, at alam ko mas marami kayong alam na estratehiya tungkol sa mga ganitong mga issues. Salamat po.
Salamat po, Ma'am Melisa.
Bago natin pakawalan si Professor Mel, may gusto muna sabihin si kasamang Roland. And by way of na rin to, summarizing the discussion so far before we go to the next resource person.
Salamat ka, Bobit. Sa lahat ng mga kasama, Happy Labor Day. Professor Melisa, maraming salamat po sa oras ninyo. Palagi po tayo nakikita lately, no, doon sa mga ILO meetings natin. Anyway, to wrap it up everything, no, from doon sa tinanong ni Brother Edwin, papunta sa mga tanong ni Brother Ronnie, malalaman naman po natin talaga na ang response ng gobyerno is reactive at saka myopic, in a sense na hindi po pangkalahatan o hindi po progressive yung kanilang response sa COVID-19, lalo-lalo na dun sa mga measures na matutulungan yung mga manggagawang Pilipino. Katulad po ng bigyan na lang po tayo ng mga concrete examples. Itong camp, no? Camp, libreng bakuna, ECC determination of COVID-19 as occupational and work-related disease. Hindi po ito nanggaling sa generosity ng employers or ng Department of Labor. Ito po ay panawagan ng labor sector. So nakikita po natin na pag hindi po magsalita o hindi gumawa ng isang hakbang ang labor sector, wala pong mangyayari sa atin. Pero pag hinayaan natin ang Department of Labor gumawa ng policy, no, katulad nitong ECC cash benefit. Ano ba yung klaseng policy na yan na ilalagay nila na empleyado yung mag-a-apply ng ECC cash benefit pag naging COVID positive siya? COVID positive nga siya. Hindi nga siya makakalabas ng bahay niya o nasa ospital siya. Paano pa siya mag-apply ng cash benefit? Di ba dapat ginawa na nilang package yun na employer ang mag-a-apply nun? Katulad nitong ECC, no, na determination na ang COVID-19 ay isang occupational or work-related disease, which is yan naman po ay nanggaling naman sa mga panukala ng labor sector sa National Tripartite Industrial Peace Council. Nakikita po natin ito ay kulang. Sa totoo po, sa isang positive, COVID-19 positive worker, ang apektado po dyan hindi lang siya, pati yung mga kasamahan niya sa trabaho. So let us put this way, one worker positive ng COVID-19, 50 yung magkwa-quarantine. Pero itong COVID-19 worker, meron siyang cash benefit. Paano yung 50 na nag-quarantine ng 2 linggo? No work, no pay po sila. Dapat sana, nung ginawa nilang panukala tong ECC COVID-19 cash benefit na to, isinama sana nila yung tinatawag natin na paid quarantine leave para sa mga manggagawa na na-quarantine. Alam naman natin quarantine, no work, no pay. Okay lang po sana kung merong mga favorable company policies or collective bargaining agreements that provides extended leave benefits or extended paid leave incentives or benefits sa collective bargaining agreement. Paano po yung sa mga kumpanya na walang union? Mga workers na katulad ng platform workers na they are not organized. Isa lang dun sa isang rider lang yung mag-positive. Ilang riders po yung magiging magko-quarantine na walang kikitain. So, napaka po palagi, sobra sa kulang. Ibig sabihin na short palagi. Hindi tayo pwedeng pumalakpak sa mga ginagawa nila kasi meron pa ring kulang. So hindi po natin maintindihan, kaya sabi nga ni kasamang Edwin kanina na there is a gap in the policy making process. The people making the policies are not really entrenched to the issues of the workers. Masyadong superficial po yung kanilang exposure, masyadong ampaw yung kanilang kaalaman sa mga pangangailangan ng mga manggagawa. Yan ang problema po kasi walang workers representative sa IATF. Matagal na po nating panukala yan na maglagay ng workers representative sa IATF. Buti pa nga yung mga negosyante meron dun. Pero paano yung workers? Hindi naman tayo pwede mag-rely kay Secretary Bello because he is not a technocrat. He is a politician appointed to a very technical department. Wala siyang nalalaman talaga sa tunay na pangangailangan ng mga manggagawa. So yan po sana ang ma-realize ng ating pamahalaan. We are not just criticizing it, but we are also giving them options, no? Like for example, workers representation to the IATF, workers representations to real workers representations to the different tripartite bodies. Like for example, Pag-ibig, the PCSO and etc. So talagang walang genuine workers representation. Kaya palaging sablay o palaging kulang o overall palpak yung response ng ating administrasyon sa pangailangan ng workers, no? I'm talking about the needs of the workers, ayuda, paid quarantine leave, additional benefits para doon sa mga nag-positive sa COVID. So, kailangan talaga na maging open-minded yung ating pamahalaan at pakinggan din yung mga manggagawang Pilipino. Maraming salamat po, Professor Melisa.
Bobby, may dagdag lang ako, Bobby. One minute lang.
Okay, sige.
Okay, tungkol dun sa kaninang sinasabi ni Prof. Mel na there's a need for the NTIPCs, yung mga regional tripartite. Actually, sa NTIPC level, pinag-uusapan to before the Department orders sa Labor Advisory are being issued. Nandun yung tripartite yun eh. But on the other hand, whatever representations given or positions given relate by the labor group, nasa sideswipe eh. At the end of the paglabas ng Department Order and Labor Advisory, kapos, kumbaga sa ano eh, walang hangin para sa kapakanan ng mga ng labor, hindi masyado balansyado, and then we just have to abide with. Kaya importante dito, we've been as far as our UNI-PLC is concerned, we've been advocating for to strengthen yung mga local union under its affiliates federations. Because at the end of the day, you cannot just rely doon sa mga tripartite bodies na to na magagawa yung dapat gawin kasi nag-aaway-aaway na yun doon, but in spite of that, wala nangyayari. So therefore, it's imperative for all local unions to be vigilant, to ensure na yung nilalabas sa the advisory department orders, tinitingnan ng lahat yan. At kung merong problema sa mga CBAs, pwede magkaroon ng presentation. Like for example, yung pag-implement ng mga flexible working time arrangement, etc., yung shortened working hours. Kung may union, dapat makialam ang union. Dapat nakatayo ang union diyan. Magtanong, itanong. At pwede naman pag-usapan yan. Hindi pwedeng pag sinabi dahil based on the advisory. There are various loopholes yan sa mga advisories na yan, which are not in conforms with the provisions in the labor code. Kaya importante sa local level, dapat mag-umpisa doon ng pagiging vigilant. And siguro marami dito sa all sectors na kasama natin ay hindi maaaring iasa lang sa federasyon yan, hindi maaaring iasa sa TIPC and NTIPC and sa RTIPC yan. Kailangan maging maayos ang mga lokal. Kasi kung hindi, may iwanan tayo sa lahat sa pansitan. Yun ang mangyayari dyan. Alam naman natin ng mga pinalalabas na to is mas may killing doon sa kabila. At yun ang nangyayari. At sinasamantala ito ng kabila. And of course, for the main reason na kailangan survival ng business. Kailangan tulungan. Of course, we understand that. We do understand that. But then again, hindi naman pwedeng dahil lang sa dahilan na yan ibibigay na lang namin yun at papayag na lang kami sa inyong gawin. Dapat mag-usap ang union locally doon sa kanilang mga management para malaman nila na ito karapatan din ng union. At bago yan, magkaroon ng maliwanag na masasabi natin na ito ay magagawa nyo lang sa panahon ng pandemic at hindi ito dire-diretso na even after the pandemic, gagawin nyo pa rin because nagawa nyo na. Because there are managers who would say na there is a precedent. This has become a precedent. Oh my. Kaya nga importante yun kung pwedeng magkaroon kasulatan, we are agreeing to this, o kasama ang union dito, paliwanag sa mga tao na kasama ang union dito, but with certain limits, with restriction, kung hanggang saan lang. Yun ang importante doon. Again, but then sa level ng national and regional, pinag-uusapan ito at wala namang may sasagot yung mga nandun nakaupo lang, kundi paglabas nila ng orders at saka advisories, iba ang nangyayari. Yun lang. Maraming salamat po.
Maraming salamat. Sa puntong ito, may isa pang tanong sa chat box, pero palagay ko mas masasagot ito nung susunod nating resource person. Magpapasalamat na tayo kay Professor Mel sa kanyang pagpapaunlak sa ating imbitasyon. Maraming salamat at sa susunod na pagkikita natin. Hopefully face to face sa SOLAIR.
Sa ulitin, Prof. Mel, sa ulitin ha. Huwag kayong magdadala.
Opo, sa SOLAIR. Kailan kaya yun? 2025.
Bukas. Next week.
I would like to ask the indulgence of the participants. Lalampas tayo nung ating 12 o'clock kasi medyo napahaba yung ating discussion sa previous topic. At this point, para hindi na tayo tagal masyado, tinatawagan ko ang ating susunod na resource person. Kasama natin, matagal na ring unionista na ngayon ay nagtatrabaho sa UNI-APRO sa ating regional office bilang youth director at coordinator ng MEI at gaming activities. Tinatawagan ko si kasamang Michelle Belino.
Thank you, Ka Bobby. Thank you, Miss Melisa. Thank you, UNI-PLC. Nagulat ako sinabi ni Kuya Bobby, aabot tayo ng lampas alas 12. Yung i-report ko naman, nabanggit na halos din ni Miss Melisa. Tatanggap na lang ako ng mga tanong. Pwede ba yun?
Pwede naman, pwede naman.
Pwede naman. Hindi, joke lang. So, una ulit, binabati ko kayo lahat ng Happy Labor's Day sa inyong lahat, 2021 virtual. So, it is an opportunity for me to be with you all in this special occasion. So, gaya nga nasabi ni Kuya Bobby, I'm the UNI-APRO Director for Media, Youth, ASEAN Activities, and Coordinator for Gaming Sector. And I was tasked by UNI-PLC to present or give a presentation on mapping out union movement negotiating position and policy recommendations for the post-pandemic world. So, may mga bagay na rin na nabanggit kanina sa ating mga discussion with regards to the challenges of the pandemic, kung ano yung kagaya ng sinabi ni Sir Exie kanina, yung sa automation, digitalization ng mga different sectors, at gaya na rin sinabi ni Ms. Melisa kanina. This is a very timely topic kasi most of the union negotiations now are done virtually. But we have to understand as well that negotiation within this pandemic situation requires really a critical thinking and comprehensive review of your CDA provisions. Kasi dun sa mga nabanggit kaninang challenges, kung ano yung mga na-experience ng mga unions, workers, employees natin ngayon is different before. So may mga nag-end na ng CBA since last year na nag-start ang pandemic at yung mga virtual negotiations. Pero may naisama ba tayong mga bagong provisions na there are certain provisions na kailangan natin ngayon like remote working. May naipasama na ba tayong provisions sa ating mga CBA with regards to that one, dun sa mga nag-end na ng CBA. And dun sa mga ongoing and CBA negotiations, this is a very timely that we have to think on how we can review our provisions with regards to CBA. So since early 2020, yung rapid spread ng virus and subsequent lockdowns has sped up the remote working trend. So with an estimated of 30 to 45% employed workers, which depends on the country, are working from home or from another remote location during this period. So like in the Philippines, almost 72% of the companies have operated remotely during the community quarantines. So while it is unlikely that these levels of work or remote work will continue post-pandemic, many workers will remain outside or fixed work site, gaya ng sabi ni Ms. Mel, or with long-term demands for remote work. So UNI Global Union, with the support of UNI Finance, which is the finance sector banking, and UNI ICTS, and UNI Professionals and Managerials, they have developed a key principles to support UNI affiliates when negotiating on remote work. So during this pandemic and during this COVID-19 pandemic and beyond. So actually the aim is to guarantee that these working arrangements reconcile workers' requests for more flexibility while safeguarding labor and trade union rights and protections. So remote work can mean significant changes to the terms of employment, and remote working rules should be mandatory subject to collective bargaining. So yung mga nabanggit kaninang mga rules and mga challenges, yung mga bagong pag-aaral sa remote working, it should be subject to collective bargaining. So let me share with you, I have some slides. Ay, Kuya Bobby, hindi ako makapag-share ng screen. So I will be presenting with you the UNI Global Key Trade Union Principles for ensuring workers' rights when working remotely. Actually, this has been presented last February during the this was being presented during the UNI webinar on remote work. So, but for the purpose of our discussion, I will just give a background on this report. So first, what do we mean by remote work? So nasabi na tong kanina, it has a broad and wider scope. It can be fully remote or partly remote. So when we say fully remote, employees don't have to come at office at all, or partly remote employees, they might be required to come to office but a few times every month. So ito yung remote work, ito yung marami nating counterpart like yung work from home arrangements ngayon. So dito pumapasok yan. In choosing the remote work under the normal circumstances, it is not the same as during the COVID-19 crisis, because many workers had assumed there are additional childcare and educational duties. Dun sa mga nagre-remote work kasi ngayon, syempre, kung ikaw ay nasa bahay, lalo na kung may pamilya ka, dumadagdag sa iyo yung responsibility to take care of your child and family at the same time while working. So some naman, they could not prepare their home office environment on time. Like yung last year, kung biglaan kang biglang i-remote work ka, hindi ka prepared kung saan ka maglalagay ng opisina mo doon sa bahay mo. Kagaya ko halimbawa ngayon, 'di ba? Hindi naman soundproof talaga ang bahay namin. Pero sa linya ng trabaho ko, kailangan talaga bawal yung masyadong may maingay, lalo na kung may mga interpreters ka during the webinar. So napakahirap mag-adjust ng ganong sitwasyon. Hindi lang sanay na ako for work from home arrangement, pero yung challenge sa akin na ingay sa environment while having webinars, yun yung pinaka nagiging problema ko. Yung also meron ding under the normal circumstances, they have faced additional psychological and physical burdens of lockdown, confinement, and isolation. Very different yan from before. Kasi yung dati pagpasok mo ng opisina, mag-check ka muna sa mga empleyado, sa mga ka-office mate mo while having coffee bago mag-work. But now, pagkagising mo ng umaga, diba, ang trabaho mo lang, paggising mo, minsan hindi ka pa maliligo, mag-work from home ka na or mag-a-attend ka na agad ng meetings. Yan ang scenario ng mga remote workers natin ngayon. And then, there are also risks that link to remote work. So, ang mga ito ay nasabi na rin ni Ms. Melisa at hindi ko na rin siya masyadong iisa-isahin. So the threat of COVID-19 imposed mandatory work is real. Many employers are limiting its voluntary aspects and many are using it as an excuse to cut jobs and pay. So the large-scale restructuring of corporations via digital offshoring is also a growing issue. So ito yung mga risks that link to remote work. The first key principle that the employers must ensure under the UNI key principles is that to ensure the freedom of association and collective bargaining for remote working work. So under this principle, employers must ensure workers' rights to form and join a trade union. There should also be a clear statement, a guideline or rules from the employers confirming employees their right to join and participate in trade union without opposing. And this can be accessible even in electronic means. So sa lahat ng mga may CBA sa atin, di ba, this is a key principle that dapat nasa provision natin that there's a clear guideline and a provision na we have a freedom of association and collective bargaining and right to participate into trade union movement. So since electronically na tayo, yung mga na-negotiated natin na items during the collective bargaining, dapat yan, pinapadala natin kahit email or electronic mail sa mga members. Kasi ang ating CBA, yung pinaka-Bible natin sa trabaho. So it should not dati kasi di ba pagkatapos ng CBA, pinapaprint pa natin yan at sinasubmit. So ngayon, yung mga negotiated CBA items natin, dapat even electronically napapadala natin sa mga members. Another area that remote work should not be used is to diminish or obstruct workers' rights to form or join a trade union, or it weaken the social dialogue and collective bargaining. So yung pagkakaroon ng mga remote workers, hindi siya dapat nakakaapekto sa ating social dialogue with the employers as well as our collective bargaining. So the second principle is that employers should maintain employment rights and relationships with working workers. So under this principle, employees, including those on short or fixed-term contracts, working remotely must remain under the same collective bargained rights and conditions provided by to all the workers, including equal pay, equal treatment, non-discrimination, and work-life balance under Convention 177. So yung mga negotiate natin na remote workers na empleyado, they should have remain under the collective bargaining. Kung ano yung kahit mga office-based na yung iba. So it has to be an equal treatment and non-discrimination to all. Any employer attempt to introduce remote work as a means of abandoning traditional employment relations in favor of increasingly atypical forms of contracting must be fought. So there are companies siguro na sasabihin nila na ang remote workers, pag in-introduce nila ang remote workers, this will not belong to the maybe workforce dun sa or office based. So it should not be the case. So dapat union should have to take a look at that on how will be the relationship with regards or treating workers under the remote worker setup. So definitely there will be change in workplace culture, understanding remote work alternative. It should not be, remote work is an alternative. It is not an addition to office-based work and should therefore not lead to increased workloads or longer hours. Kung mapapansin nyo kasi ngayon, yung mga nasa remote work, mas madami ang trabaho kaysa yung mga nasa office-based ka. Kasi for example, ang pasok mo sa office is 8 to 5, 'di ba? So magtatrabaho ka, you have your certain reports to pass on for the whole period. Pero kapag remote work ka, when you're working outside your office or at your home, example, mas dumadami yung workload mo. Kasi minsan yung time mo is like kung halimbawa aalis ka ng bahay ng 6, tapos darating ka sa office ng 8. Kapag remote work ka, pag gising mo ng alas 6, minsan nagtrabaho ka na online. So it should not be an addition to your office jobs before. So dapat yung remote work is magkakaroon ng time management within the employees itself. Under the remote work, the support of the employees is required. Ito yung mga regular online well-being seminars, communication tools, and also for a network for colleagues to keep in touch with each other. So nabanggit na nga rin to kanina sa ating discussion. Also, employers introducing remote work rules should particularly review their health insurance, sick leave policies, to ensure that remote workers are given equal protectors, including crisis situations when remote work may need to be extended or obligatory. So kung ano yung mga ini-introduce natin for office-based works, it should be also taken up into dun sa mga remote work workers natin. The next key principle is the use of surveillance tools to monitor remote workers. It should be restricted. So meron nga akong mga nakausap before na ini-implement yung work from home arrangement sa kanila. Pero minsan may sila sabi si company na gustong lagyan ng CCTV yung workstation mo, or parang they can see you virtually or remotely doon sa head office para makita nila kung anong ginagawa nila. Kasi minsan, remember, working from home, hawak mo yung oras mo dyan. So as long as you can submit your reports on time. So it should not be the case. Surveillance of remote workers and data storage for disciplinary aims should be restricted. and this should be regulated through law or collective agreement. So once you negotiated for a remote work arrangement under your CBA, kailangan kasama tong use of principle for surveillance tools. Workers and trade unions should be granted the right to transparency and to participate in the implementation of such tools. The next key principle is the remote work should be voluntary. So no one wishing to work remotely should be excluded from remote work unless the employer can justify it. Because remote working may not be suitable for all workers or all types of work, or not every sector gaya ng pinag-usapan natin kanina. Like finance, ICTS, professionals, and managerials. Applicable tong mga remote work arrangement. Pero meron tayong mga sektor at mga employee na hindi naman papanig dito sa remote work, like yung mga sa health natin. So, ang hirap. Pero hindi rin natin isasantabi yung health kasi with other countries, they have introduced already yung use ng telemedicine and teletherapy. So, hindi natin masabi in a few years time yung mode of technology natin under sa healthcare sector, virtual na rin. So, we have to look also into these possibilities. So this area of voluntary is very important in cases of major remote work structure or permanent worksite closure or digital offshoring of jobs. Employers should negotiate restructuring terms with trade union, and any existing legal mechanism on restructuring should be triggered. So if there is no transfer option, like for example, kapag may mga nagsarang workplaces ay nagsara, yung worker should be offered the option to transfer to another workplace location if they choose. So if there is no transfer option, the worker chooses instead to work remotely, the employer should maintain the employment relationship and there should be no reduction on pay, leave, and other terms and conditions of employment. The next key principle is that employers should respect regular working hours and the right to disconnect na partly discussed din to kanina. Remote workers are entitled to rest periods and limits to maximum hours of work, including on night shifts where applicable. Napakahalaga nitong right to disconnect na principle kasi ngayong online tayo, minsan online work, may mga employers that take advantage of those who are working remotely kasi gaya ng ang time ko lang example, halimbawa sa kumpanya ko is 8 to 5 and then 6 o'clock uuwi na ako. When I'm working at home, minsan 10 o'clock na ng gabi, nagchat pa sa akin yung manager ko or yung officer ko, hindi ko balanse, gawin ko to or ganyan. So it should not be the case kasi we have to respect also regular working hours even if we are working remotely. Flexibility to work remotely must always be accompanied by a right to disconnect from work. And this right ensures that employees can maintain a separation and balance between their personal and professional lives with full respect of working time rules where exist. The duty is to respect the right not an individual responsibility, but requires a collective approach from the management and the union. So workers should not be rewarded for choosing to remain connected outside of working hours, and those who disconnect should not be penalized. So dun sa principle na yon, kung halimbawang 24/7 ako naka-online, I should not be rewarded for doing that because you have certain rules to follow. At the same time, those who nag-disconnect agad for their work for after an 8 hours period, it should not be penalized as well. So this may require the development of new tools and rethinking how to measure work. Also, remote workers should not have a physical presence requirements replaced with the digital ones, such as endless video calls and online chats, gaya ng nasabi ko. You have to set a clear and realistic time frame for performance duties, such as it should not it should be the same for all, working remotely or office-based. The next principle is that employers should remain responsible for the health and safety of workers. So under this principle, there should be no difference between remote work and other forms of work organization when it comes to employers' collective responsibility for occupational safety and health, or health and safety, including comprehensive insurance, paid sick leave, work environment, and those who are violence-free workers under Convention 190. Another key principle is that the work equipment and remote workspace costs should be the employer's responsibility. So it means that employers should provide, maintain, and replace equipment necessary for regular remote working. Like for instance, appropriate desk, chairs, and screen. So there are a lot of equipments that can be negotiated with the employer when introducing remote work to the company. They should also compensate for direct and indirect costs necessary to perform duties, including but not limited to the rent of the workspace, insurance, electricity, internet, mobile phone service, and others. And workers' rights and responsibilities on the general organization of remote workplace should be clarified beforehand. The next principle is that remote work should be gender neutral and open to all. So it was also mentioned by Ms. Melisa kanina na the remote work must have or must be available without discrimination and gender stereotypes. Actually, the raise in cases of domestic violence during the COVID crisis also highlights a greater exposure risk to women when working remotely from home. Another key principle is that remote workers should have equal access to training and career development. Nasagot to dun sa isang tanong kanina, gaya nung pagkakaroon ng re-skilling and upskilling. So kailangan din natin to i-include into our collective agreements during negotiation. And then we have the last principle, which is the impact studies and thorough documentation. So prior to introducing or extending remote work rules, trade unions and employers should complete an impact studies and produce thorough documentation. It means that before introducing or extending remote work rules, the trade union and the employer should thoroughly assess the impact, and they have to produce documentation to all the remote working rules and regulations, highlighting any good practices as well. So remote workers' needs and expectations within their specific roles should also be assessed, clarified, and documented. The employer, with the agreement with the trade union, should provide all workers with clear and detailed information and have a complete health and safety assessment to remote work, including physical and mental health risks. So also, trade unions should be involved in all aspects of these assessments and mitigation, monitoring, and evaluation plans, including information, consultation, and exchanges, and the transnational level where applicable. So sometimes, dahil nga virtual ang ating negotiation, dapat may copy rin si trade unions ng mga datas ng employees na nagtatrabaho or working from home. Kasi syempre, na magiging natin to, basis natin to doon sa pag-formulate sa ating collective, pag-formulate ng bagong mga what do you call that? Bagong, nakalimutan ko yung term, provision sa ating CBA. So dapat may data rin, ang management is open to give data to the union with regards to this one. So that ends my presentation, and I hope that these unique principles may be as support to you as you enter your collective negotiations to reach your agreements on remote work. So if you have been negotiating or have negotiated this remote work and included this in your collective agreement, please inform us on this important topic. Thank you.
Maraming salamat, kapatid na Mitch. May tanong dito sa chat box na tanong to kay Professor Mel, pero mas appropriate to sa iyo. Ito ang tanong niya. Ask ko lang, kung patuloy pong mawawala ng trabaho ang mga manggagawa, paano na lang po ang mga kabataan na naghahanap pa lang po ng trabaho? Paano na po ang kinabukasan ng mga youth?
Yes. Actually, nabasa ko yung tanong na yan. Ang unang pumasok sa youth employment is for the trade unions, example for the trade unions, to have a secure provision on job security. Kasi lalong-lalo na sa pandemyang to, dapat yung ating collective agreement kasama ang job security provision doon. Kasi this will hold of the employees no matter kung magkaroon man ng tanggalan or merger or acquisitions with other companies. So dito pumapasok yung tibay ng ating collective agreement. So doon naman sa kabataan na para maghahanap ng trabaho, paano na yung kinabukasan nila ngayong nagtatanggalan. Gaya ng sinabi ni Ms. Mel kanina, there is always hope. Huwag tayong mawala ng pag-asa. Lahat naman yan matatapos and may hangganan. So as long na bata ka pa lang, keep on pushing hard. Kasi dapat maghahanap ka, hindi ko mawawalan ng pag-asa na hindi ako matanggap sa trabaho kasi may pandemic. There's no such thing as that. As long as you work really hard, you have to excel on yourself, magkakaroon ka pa rin ng trabaho. Yun lang. And for the union itself, ang answer ko lang doon is to have a strong job security provision in the collective agreement.
Salamat. Si Roy Villanada, may tanong rin.
Hello, good afternoon. Good afternoon. Tanong ko lang in regards with the right to disconnect ng empleyado. Ano bang status niya sa ngayon in global aspect and in the national level?
Sa right to disconnect, gaya ng na-report ko, kasama siya sa Trade Union Key Principles on Working Remotely. So, eto kasing principles na to, this would be the guide to the trade unions to include remote work in their collective negotiation. Once napasok nyo ang remote work provision in your collective agreement, you have the right to enhance this with regards to doon sa right to disconnect. Kasi kasama to doon eh. Hindi mo siya pwedeng basta sabihin sa management ngayon na kailangan hanggang ganito lang ako. Kasi may agreement yan eh. Once the employer and the employee entered into an agreement na mag-remote work siya or mag-work from home siya, it should have a guideline from the management stating until what time are you working. So, doon pumapasok ngayon ang role ng trade union to adapt the changes on the remote work policy, especially on remote working, para ma-include yung right to disconnect. Kasi importante yan. Katulad ng sa office-based natin, office-based work. Kung 8 to 5, 8 to 5, unless you file it overtime. Pero now, if you will take a look, yung scenario talaga natin ngayon, when working remotely or working from home, if you are still working 8 to 5, minsan until 12, ginagawa mo pa rin trabaho mo. So there should be also a limit when it comes to right to disconnect provisions.
Ito kasi ang a simple example yun sa group namin sa bangko. May mga bisor kami na nag-create ng GC without knowing it, bigla ka na lang magsutunog yung cellphone mo, kasali ka. Secondly, even in weekends, nagdi-discuss sila in regards with sa trabaho, ganyan. Kahit ini-mute mo yung notification, syempre, once in a while, i-pick mo siya. Kumbaga, parang mangyayari, paraan mo na sa buhay mo. Tapos, yun, gano'n. Yun yung nangyayari sa amin. Hindi lang recently siguro nagsimula to since nung magkaroon ng yung alternate na pasok, yung work from home, yung mga ganyan. Actually dapat nga yun nga ano namin, since karamihan naman ng mga ano nila, hindi naman namin na-charge eventually yung mga internet ng mga usage namin. Tapos, yun nga, sa akin, ang suggestion ko lang, it should be included in the negotiation of CBA siguro. Yun lang po. Thank you.
Yes, Karay, tama, I agree. Kasi hindi lang sa PS Bank nangyayari yan, kahit sa ibang bangko. Syempre ako galing rin ako sa bangko dati. So marami akong mga nakakachika, syempre millennial, nakakachika ng mga empleyado rin with regards to this kasi hindi lang naman PS Bank ang nag-introduce ng remote work, marami rin. So that is the role of the trade union really to have guidance. Hindi tayo basta papasok dapat doon sa agreement na oo sige itong department na to ay i-remote work natin or pwede tong work arrangement. Dapat inform si union kung ano ang guidelines with regards doon sa pagtanggap ng department na to into remote work. I think that would be the best key to solve this one. Or kung halimbawa may arrangements, especially dun sa chat, kaya gaya rin masabi ko kanina na endless video calls and chat kahit weekend, may mga right to privacy and private life din tayo. So kung halimbawa dapat naka-state din dun sa guidelines that with regards to work online dun sa mga chat, it should be within the scope of the Monday to Friday work schedule kung yun yung arrangement nyo. Kasi minsan syempre, unless you agree to those chats, hindi naman related doon sa trabaho. So, yun, ganun siya.
Thank you. Salamat. May comment sa chat box from Josh Raho. For work from home arrangement, management should also give us additional pay for electricity and internet connection.
Oo. Actually tama yan. Ulitin ko rin gaya ng sabi ko kanina. So lahat yung mga issues and concerns natin with regards to work from home arrangement or remote workers, it should be forced through to the union to include the remote work policy or remote work provision sa CBA natin. Kasi doon lang natin ma-secure yung seguridad ng trabaho at saka ng remote work arrangements natin.
Meron pa ba pong mga tanong o additional comments? Meron pa ba po?
Tingin ko wala na, kuya.
Hindi pa nagugutom
Meron sana ako para kay Prof. Mel. Pero wala na naman si Prof. Mel. Oo.
Nag-e-echo ka, sir. Dalawa yung nakabukas yata sa'yo.
Paano naman na? Mamamatay ko. Di kaya binustong isa ko pa. Lalayo ko lang.
Alisin ko yung isa.
Sige, alisin mo yung isa.
Inalis ko lang yung isa.
Ako na.
Mag-echo. Okay.
Hindi, wala na si Prof. Mel, ano?
Wala na.
Okay. Ito sa mga bangko lang kasi, I just wanted to clarify na she made mention about the frontier tech, which hasten, especially sa mga bangko and insurance of the fintech system na inaano ng mga fintech services. Kung ano ang pagkakaiba ng frontier tech at saka sa bangko sa fintech o ang identification mo ng frontier is para sa lahat ng sector or at yung fintech naman ay para sa financial sector lang. Yun naman gusto ko rin tanong kay Mel, kay Professor Mel. Pero yun na.
Wala na siya.
Wala na. Kung tatanong yung right to disconnect, tinanong naman yata na Binuksan na ni Michelle yun. In-open ni Michelle yun. Okay, wala na ako. I'm good.
Meron pa ba?
Siguro pagbigyan natin yung transport kasi sa mga sektor na tinamaan ng maigi, yung transport natin, why don't we let somebody sparring friend siguro or si Utol to expound on what's happening with the transport group kasi sila ang malaking problema din sila dahil hindi sila pinapabiyahe para na ma-share lang dito sa celebration na to webinar. Bobby, that's my suggestion.
Meron ba na pwede?
Si Ka-Fred, nandyan yata. Si Ka-Fred.
Ka-Fred? Pag wala, ikaw na lang. Pero para di ko nagsampay.
Andyan din si
Wala na si Ka-Fred.
Pangulong Bert.
Baka nagla-lunch na yun.
Galing sa Bohol at Pangulong Isabelo from Batangas. Ayan si Ka Jobel nag-raise ng hand.
Ka Jobel.
Boss Jobel, ikaw.
Dahil binanggit na ni Pangulo Exie yung transport. Yung situation ngayon na minimal ang bumabalik sa transport. Oo, minimal pa. Ang unti-unti lang eh. Karamihan dito yung Metro Manila lang. Tapos ang provincial area, ginagawa nilang carousel. No? Pagkatapos, may long-term na problema rito sa kanila. Mawawala na, karamihan, mawawala na yung sinasabing conductors. No? Although ang ginagawa rito, driver-conductor, ang karamihan rin, pero mostly yung conductors ay hindi na pinapabalik. Yun ang problema na. So, anong transformation ang pwedeng gagawin dito? Ang pangalawang bagay na gagawin ng transport industry, magiging big card ba yun? O card na lang yung mag-i-install sila ng savings device sa mga buses at isusundan mo. Kagaya na nangyayari. Alam ba, matagal na natin na naranasan yan eh. Malaysia, Singapore, Japan, or some other countries. ASEAN countries, meron na yan eh. Walang konduktor. So card na lang. Ang nakikita na bagay, kailangan dapat itong mga conductors bigyan pa rin ng trabaho at sila sa bawat bus stop ay magkaroon ng kiosk dyan na pag-aari pa rin ng kumpanya. O kung isa lang, magbibenta na ng card yung gagawin ng mga ito. O doon sa mga terminals nila, o di kaya sa mga dropping stations ng mga kumpanya. So, ang mangyayari ay ma-retrench itong mga conductors. Kaya problema, isang long-term na problema ito. No? Ang automation ay ginagawa na dito sa atin sa Pilipinas, although na 10 years before ay nasa ibang bansa na yung mga yan. So, isa yun sa mga problema na kinakailangan pag-usapan ng transport groups para kung paano i-resolve itong bagay na to. May mga initial na pag-uusap pero hindi pa gaano kaplansado yung bagay na yan. So, sa gana ngayon, hindi pa fully. O at tingin ko nga mga 50% pa lang bumabalik sa mga manggagawa lang, sa mga kasama natin sa transport or less than 50% pa lang yung bumabalik. At from time to time, nai-istorbo pa ng ECQ, MECQ o mga mang Q, pati barbecue, hindi na sila kumakain. Kasi wala na makain, wala rin ayuda. Wala nang ayuda, wala na rin camp. Kaya right time lang yan na hinihingi natin na mayroong dapat daily subsistence itong mga manggagawa. At saka monthly subsistence nga, dapat yung maski 10,000 lang o minimum wage dapat na maibibigay dito under 118 na yung EU 118. So, ganyan siguro yung kailangan pag-usapan at kailangan mag-meet yung transport industry para tugunan ang karaniwang yung malaganap na problema ngayon ng transport industry. So siguro, more on siguro si pangalan nito, yung mga kasama natin sa transport, may bibigay siguro na iba pang problema tungkol dyan. Kasi sa amin, yun ang naiipon natin na problema, maski pinag-usapan rin sa nagkaisa yan, pinag-usapan sa iba-ibang grupo, no? Dito sa atin, kailangan mag-usap rin yung transport group natin, UNI-PLC transport group tungkol dyan. Buti nabanggit ni Pangulong Exie yung bagay na yan, maski hindi pa man confirmed as member ng UNI-PLC yung transport industry. Pero meron tayong responsibilidad na tugunan o solbahin yung mga problema rin ng mga manggagawa. No? Kasama, yun lang siguro. Kung may dagdag si kasamang Roland, saka yung mga kasama natin sa si kasamang pangalan na ito, si kasamang Fred. Yun. Maraming salamat. Yun lang ang isang bagay na nakita ko.
Salamat ka Jobel. Mga kasama, ano lang tayo extend pa tayo ng 10 to 15 minutes para matapos lang yung ating discussion. Baka may gustong idagdag si Cabert Noronio o si Ka Isabelo. Nandito pa ba sila? Meron bang idadagdag? Nakamute kayo. Wala na. Habang naghahanda yung may comment dito si galing sa isang sa tiga DBP Sidrol. The right to disconnect should be emphasized in the CNA considering there are supervisors oftentimes in their desire to clinch targets would call or text their people even at midnight. Hintay natin yung comment ng ni Ka Isabelo.
Hello. Okay. Tanghali po. Hello.
Chappy, Ka Isabelo, baka hindi kaya ng internet mo, pakipatay na lang ang video para maintindihan namin yung yung sinasabi.
Magandang tanghali po. Papakinggan po. Magandang tanghali po.
Sige.
Sa transport po. Hello. Transport po talaga hindi po lingid sa atin laganap yung talagang kawalan, yung mga empleyado kawawa. Pero sa akin pong kumpanya sa Ceres, hindi ko yung aking kumpanya na Ceres na bilang pangulo ko ng union doon, ay ile-layoff. Wala po sa aming layoff, problema po, walang biyahe. Walang biyahe ang Ceres, ang gobyerno ayaw pa nilang pagbiyahe. Kung ang problema po ng ibang kumpanya, yung ibang kumpanya sa transport nagsasara, nilelayo pa mga conductor, driver lang po yung natitira. Pero sa akin naman po sa Ceres, hindi naman po. Wala po sa amin layoff, walang problema ang conductor, walang problema ang driver. Kaya nga lang po, konti lang yung biyahe. Kaya halos konti pa lang yung biyahe, hindi pa talaga nagpo-full force yung biyahe. Kaya yun po ang problema. Kaya yung mga conductors, driver, wala din pong kayod. Pero sa amin po, wala namang layoff sa Ceres. Pero dito po sa Batangas, sa dalawang bus o tatlong bus, driver na lang po yan. Wala na pong conductor. Which po natin yung pinapayagan. Sa support na rin po ni Sir Roland de la Cruz, kami po ay magkatandem, hindi po namin papayagan na mawawala ang conductor sa aming pong company. At yun din po ang sinasabi namin sa ibang kumpanya na paglaban yung mga conductor dahil kawawa naman kung mawawala naman ng trabaho. Maraming po salamat at happy Labor Day today. Salamat po sa pag-invite sa akin, Sir Roland de la Cruz, sa inyo po lahat, yung mga nag-speaker, yung lahat pong nakakasama sa Zoom. Magandang tanghali po sa inyo, Sir Roland, and happy Labor Day po sa ating lahat, and thank you.
Sa punto pong ito,
mabuhay.
Mabuhay. Sa punto
Ako
pong
sana,
ito,
kung may
kailangan na
oras pa
magpaalam.
sana, Bobby, kung may oras pa sana,
ay,
i-request ko sana si EVP na magsalita pa tungkol doon sa health workers. Anyways, sa ibang pagkakataon na siguro.
Sa punto pong ito, nagpaalam na si yung ating resource person. Pasasalamatan na lang natin siya, si Michelle, si kasamang Michelle Belino. Meron pa siyang susunod na na pagpupulong. Pero pwede pa rin tayo na magpatuloy ng ilang minuto sa diskusyon kung meron pang ibang gustong comment o magtanong. Wala na lang nga tayong resource person.
Ako lang, Bobby. I suggest mo nga if we can ask the EVP or to Brother Roland to speak about the problems in the health workers. The reason being is that isa ito sa mga pwede nang ipresenta ng UNI-PLC sa NTIPC na kasama tayo nag-represent para to sa labor. Kung mamaraparte ni Brother Roland.
Hello, Brother Exie, sorry, nawawala yung signal ko. Hindi ko nakuha yung sinabi mo.
Hindi, kung ang request lang ko na sana para naman mapasama dito sa recording natin, kung ano ang mga hinaharap natin problema sa mga kasama natin na sa UNICARE, sa health workers, na kasama naman sa UNI-PLC. At para naman ang dahilan kung bakit natin pinag-uusapan lahat dahil Labor Day ngayon, para kahit pa paano maisama natin doon sa ating pag-representa sa NTIPC once na magkaroon ng meeting. Yun lang.
Unfortunately, kay Exie, wala sila ngayon kasi may duty silang lahat ng mga officers, ng mga care workers. So, I will just request them na lang to submit a situationer to UNI-PLC.
Sige.
I think mas maganda na sila talaga yung mag-report. Kaso lang, nagpadala sila ng mensahe na nasa duty sila ngayon. Medyo mahirap din yung situation ng mga home care workers niya kasi wala silang mga day off. Hindi sila nakakauwi sa kanilang pamilya para na rin maproteksyonan yung kanilang mga pasyente. Yun po. Salamat, Pangulo.
Okay. Bukod doon, para sa kalaman ng lahat, boy, isa na lang, para sa kalaman ng lahat ng mga participants, ito pong UNI-PLC ay all sector po to. Kaya kung napapansin niyo, hindi lang po sa bangko, hindi lang to sa transportasyon, hindi lang sa health workers, hindi lang sa commerce, lahat po dito kasama. 13 federasyon po nakasali dito. Pera pa yung mga kasama natin sa banking industry na hindi kasali, pero kasama natin sa webinar na to. At mabuhay. Maraming salamat po. Bobby, please.
mga 12:30 na gaya nga ng pangako natin na tatapusin natin to sa sa takdang panahon na may kaunti lang na extension. Sa punto pong ito para isara ang ating webinar, Kajobel, meron kang last na gusto sabihin?
Tatanong ko lang, lilipat ba tayo sa kabilang broad webinar?
Yung mga gusto. Yung iba yata may activity na iba. So, tingnan natin kung sino pwede.
Okay.
Pangulong nandiyan na.
So,
sa Bohol.
Tawagan ko ang ating Executive Vice President ng UNI-PLC para sarahan ng formal ang ating webinar at pasalamatan ang mga participants. Salamat. Boss Roland.
Maraming salamat ka, Bobit. No? Bago natin po isara, gusto ko lang magtanong kung meron pa pong gustong gusto may sabihin or i-share sa ating mga participants. Kami po ay humingi ng paumanhin na lumampas po tayo sa takdang oras ng pagtatapos dahil din po sa magandang diskusyon at saka mainit na topiko na ating pinag-uusapan. Ako po ay nagpapasalamat kasama yung mga organisations namin doon sa mga nag-participate ngayon at at yung sa mga kanilang bahay, no? Salamat at kayo ay nagbigay din ng oras para sa ating pupulong na ito. So, sa ulit, happy Labor Day, happy International Labor Day po sa inyong lahat at mabuhay ang manggagawang Pilipino. Maraming salamat.
Happy Labor Day. Happy Labor Day.
Salamat sa mga dumalo.
Labor Day po.
Happy Labor Day.
Happy Labor Day.
Isang palakpak. Mabuhay ang manggagawang Pilipino. Mabuhay.
Mabuhay ang manggagawang Pilipino. Happy Labor Day, everyone.
Happy Labor Day sa mga participants natin from Mindanao, Visayas, and Luzon. Maraming salamat po sa inyong lahat.
Palayang araw.
Thank you very much.
Umabot tayo ng 88 sa ating mga participants.
89. Bobby, 89. Yeah.
89.
It was a good one. You can have a follow-up even not on a Labor Day. Baka maraming diskusyon na kailangan natin eh. Mag-imbita na lang tayo ng taga-department.
Hindi pa tapos ang
Mag-imbita na lang tayo taga-department of Labor.
Okay, maraming salamat.
Para maliwanagan.
Pagaling ka.
Maraming salamat. Bye-bye. Pagaling ang may COVID dyan. Kung meron sana wala.
Nating mga may COVID at saka yung mga kasamahan natin na nag-isolate. Galing po kayo.
Sir Exie. Sir Exie, done with my second dose Sinovac, sir, today. Wow, si President.
Wow, galing. Nanette, ikaw ba yan?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Galing. May second dose na. Di pwede na tayo mag-meeting na.
Bawal. Lilipad ako, sir eh. Lilipad po ako.
Papuntang US.
Opo.
Okay, safe na sa US. Huwag ka magkalala. 80% na doon. Okay.
Graduate,
so,
sir.
mukhang,
thank you.
Bye-bye na. Maglalag pa ako. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Keep safe, everyone. Keep safe po. Happy Labor Day.
Maraming salamat sa BMRCPI at sa mga
Thank you. Bobby, sa lahat
Maraming salamat po sa lahat ng mga
community pantry at saka donasyon doon sa sa Hospicio de San Jose. Inaantay pa namin ang mga darating na tulong at maibigay natin para sa UNI-PLC ito. Ayun namang isa sa UP Balara at tumulong na rin ang UNI Youth. So, kung meron pa kayong mga extra dyan, please just get in touch with OWI sa NUBE. Okay? Maraming salamat po. And Bobby, see you later at 3 o'clock.
Barangay Old Balara yan, Pangulo ha.
Barangay Old Balara. Yeah. Okay. Thank you. Bye-bye.